I'm showing on my screen, but that's okay. So welcome everybody again to blockchain security. I'm Christian Seifert, and you find all my contact information down here. So email, obviously it's Seattle email, my Twitter handle, and then if you work in crypto, you're allowed on a whole bunch of applications. So there's Telegram, Discord are kind of the two main ones, and so you can reach out to me with any of those means. So what we'll go over today is just a little bit of introductions, meet each other, get to learn a little bit about your background and why you're in this class. Then we'll go over the syllabus as well as the assignments and projects. Then we'll take a quick break and then move into a lecture talking about motivation of blockchain. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I did my master's at Seattle University back in 2004. It was a software engineering master's, and back then, Seattle U offered actually a security concentration. I'm not sure whether that is still the case anymore. And so that's really how I got into security. And there was a particular class from Barbara Endicott-Popovsky, and she was really great at bringing in guest speakers. And so there was one guest speaker, Dave Tittrick, who was a researcher working at the HoneyNet project, which is a nonprofit kind of security research community. And that's kind of how I got involved into with that project. And then really my career started in the security space. So working with other kind of like-minded people in security. And then I published a paper and Microsoft saw it and they're like, hey, can you talk, come over and present your work? And I did, and then they offered me an internship. I joined as an intern and then joined as a full-time employee afterwards. But in between there, I actually got my PhD at Victoria University of Wellington in computer science. So that's in New Zealand. My research was focused on honeypot related research. And as I said, I've been working at Microsoft for majority of my career, 14 years in total as a security researcher. I worked at well, several teams. So initially when I joined, I worked at Microsoft Bing, the search engine, working on honeypot technology. Then I moved into the browser team, working on identifying malicious web pages. And then kind of the last team I worked on was the Defender team that was responsible for the antivirus product. And I was telling Colin just a minute ago, when I initially joined, it was a really small team. It was essentially the Windows Defender team, which was a free version of antivirus solution that shipped with Windows. And then kind of the business model at Microsoft changed, right? We didn't sell Windows anymore, and so there was a revenue stream missing. And so then what Microsoft did is they changed their business model. They basically said, hey, we want to sell premium services on top of our operating system, and security was one of them. And who buys these premium services? It's not consumers, it's enterprises. So basically it pivoted towards enterprise customers in the security space. And then these enterprise customers said, well, it's great that you have this free antivirus solution, but we really need, we need our solution on Macs, on Linux, we need on server, we don't need just antivirus protection, we also need phish protection, we need a post-breach detection. And so basically what happened over the time I was at Microsoft, and that was probably the last 8 years or so, it really expanded from an antivirus solution to a full-fledged security offerings for enterprises. And now security is actually its own division at Microsoft. As a security researcher, I primarily worked on malware analysis as well as machine learning models to drive protection into the service. My last role was a group manager that was responsible for the email service, the anti-phishing and anti-spam aspect of that product. I'm sorry?
Report it now.
Report it now, that's right. But over the last, I want to say, year and a half, so yeah, about a year and a half ago, my friend told me, well, about Ethereum's move to proof of stake. And I was like, what's that? And so I started to read up on it a little bit, and I noticed that there was a whole slew of innovation that was happening on the blockchain. And so I read more and more, and then spending my weekends and evenings learning about this space. And then at a certain point, I asked myself, well, if I do this on the weekends and in the evenings, why don't I make it my full-time job? And so then about a half a year, I moved to Web3, to blockchain, to a company called the Forta Foundation, which is essentially a distributed network that monitors on-chain activity for attacks. And we'll go into more detail on exactly how it works later in the course. The new company that's been founded about a year ago, incubated by Open Zeppelin, which is a security auditor and a company that provides smart contract libraries. Very reputable, well-known company, and so they incubated Forta. And so the Forta network is up and running. It's protecting and detecting on-chain attacks. And just to give you an idea on how the threat landscape looks like on the blockchain right now, obviously we have many, many different blockchains, but about last year, calendar year, so 2021, $2 billion were stolen from the blockchain, essentially, from smart contracts, from protocols. And this year, that number is, obviously the year is not over yet, and that number has been exceeded. Just yesterday, Wintermute is a protocol, well, it's not a, it's a protocol, is a liquidity provider, got exploited for $160 million. And that was an attack that was executed within a matter of an hour. And once the assets are stolen from the protocol, it's game over. So a lot of money at stake, and I think if you have interest in making Web3 successful, I think security is an essential component of that. If there's continued to be hacks, both on the protocol side as well as user wallets, it will erode trust, and Web3 will not be successful. So I already talked a little bit about my blockchain crypto story, but the first time I got into crypto, you'll appreciate that, Colin, was actually at Microsoft, where at the time we were investigating APTs. So basically state-sponsored adversaries that are attacking computer systems and attacking Microsoft's users. And one group in particular, Strontium, so Microsoft uses kind of these chemical element names as code names. So Strontium is a group that was associated with the Russian government, and they were launching spear phishing attacks on political activists. And what we noticed is that they used a domain registrar that accepts Bitcoin. And I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. And so this was the first time I purchased some Bitcoin to just kind of go through the flow to see how anonymous it is. So that's how I first got into crypto. That was, probably 2013 or so. And then I ignored it for many years. And then my friend told me about this proof of stake shift of the Ethereum network. And then I started really paying attention. And I was like, wow, I really missed all this innovation that was happening. At first, I really underestimated the potential around blockchain. I thought it was just, you know, you can transfer digital assets and you can create coins, but I didn't really see any killer applications that exist on the blockchain. And then in 2020, the summer of DeFi happened, and there was a whole bunch of innovation, and we'll talk about that in more detail. I have never taught a course, so bear with me. It's obviously a very small class, and so I hope that we can really make this more of a discussion and an education team. You guys bring a lot to the table, and so I don't really want to stand here the entire 2 hours every day. And the other thing is I thought this class is going to be much larger. Either way is fine. But this gives us an opportunity to also adjust the course. So I'm really interested to hear what you're interested in. We'll go over the syllabus, give me feedback if there's something that you want to dive more into. We have, you know, I'm 7 sessions in terms of preparing my slides and content. And so there's plenty of opportunity to adjust as we like. Also, I want to say I'm not an economist. Especially in the first few lessons, I'll talk a little bit about, you know, monetary policy. So take that with a grain of salt, what comes out of my mouth there.
Valedictorian in a business, so I'll try to help. Right.
Okay.
I'm also not an economist. But
okay, perfect. See, education team we are. And then lastly, I just want to mention some of the content is I've lifted from Michael Llewellyn, who's a colleague of mine at Open Zeppelin, who is teaching a blockchain course, not necessarily a blockchain security course. And so some of the intro slides I've taken from him, and you'll see that in the credits. Any questions, comments? Sure.
Seems like the exchange rate between Ethereum and the US dollar is still trending down. Is there any reasons for that, or are there some problems? I don't really know any context or background on it. So.
I think what people are suspecting, so basically proof of work, you have all the miners that exist that basically validate blocks, or they mine blocks, not validate blocks. And what happened last week is essentially that revenue stream was shut off, right? Those miners are essentially out of business on the Ethereum blockchain. They can move to a different chain and continue to mine there with their hardware that they already purchased, but like Ethereum mainnet, they no longer can. And there was an influx of Ethereum into exchanges, likely mostly from miners that then started to sell. And then also what you'll see in crypto often is sell the news, where token prices go up in anticipation of something, and then the thing happens, and then the price actually goes down. But again, I am not going, hey, you're Andrew? Good meeting you, Andrew. Also disclaimer, to kind of the second to last bullet, whatever I'm saying is not financial advice. Risk, like crypto investing is super risky, and you know, it could go up, it could go down. Does that answer your question? And we'll go a little bit more around kind of mining and then proof of stake and proof of work.
Tactic, but it wasn't really like a new value prop necessarily in terms of like kind of to the killer app conversation. Like it's like, okay, it's a different attribute for your protocol.
That's right. It works exactly like the stuff that you can do with it is the same. The only change is that it is more environmentally friendly, the proof of stake versus the proof of work. And as a result, it is more appealing to ESG investment funds that kind of look at environmental impact. But I was just watching a video where somebody said, well, you know, all those ESG funds, they're not going to pour money into it now. given we don't know whether it is actually reliable, right? And I mean, the shift happened, and it was successful, but that doesn't mean that, you know, a month from now, there's going to be, you know, an error or an attack that is happening. So I think it's going to, you know, they're going to watch it and see what happens. But I was super thrilled that it happened and successfully so. So what is this course about? So learning about, and I'm sorry, I don't have my screen here. It's black, so I'll fix that during the break. Learn about blockchain technology with a focus on security. As I mentioned, no prior knowledge is required. We'll cover the basics and theoretical concepts. The course will be applied and hands-on, interacting with the blockchain in a programmatic fashion. You know, directly or either through analytics services. This is primarily development in Python, but there's a lot of libraries that are, I mean, blockchain, usually people do it in JavaScript, but I dislike JavaScript, so I personally use Python, but you can use JavaScript.
That's fine.
Yeah. And then we'll deploy smart contracts in Solidity. There is going to be some red teaming and some blue teaming. So red teaming means we'll hack some smart contracts, vulnerable smart contracts, and then blue teaming is we'll develop some detection bots and deploy them onto the Forta network to identify those sort of attacks. So the first half is really about kind of the foundation. There's not going to be much about security. We'll talk a little bit about cryptography and then kind of how a blockchain is built under the hood. But really the second half is where we'll dive into security. And the focus will be more on on-chain monitoring and incident response, not so much around smart contract auditing, although I have a guest lecturer who will talk about that. And then since I came from Microsoft, from a large company, moving into the crypto space has been quite a cultural experience. It works very, very differently. And so I'll share a little bit of what I have learned. And that should also help you if you want to get involved in the blockchain ecosystem. One thing to kind of note there is blockchain projects are distributed by nature. There's not like one big company and everybody works for the company. There's a small foundation, and then usually they work with the broader community, and anybody can get involved in the community. And so theoretically, you could have, you know, Mondays, you work for project 1. Tuesday, you work for project 2. And Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you take off. I mean, it is very flexible and welcoming. And I'll talk a little bit about how you can get involved. All right. Any questions? Does that kind of meet what you expected? Go ahead, Mark. Well, I mean, you have to think about that there's global competition, right? Like anybody around the globe can work for those companies. And so I think the salaries or kind of the compensation is maybe not as competitive as, you know, working for Microsoft. But depends on where you're located. But it's certainly very flexible and you know, I don't think blockchain will save the world, but I think it will, you know, be a big technology in the future in our daily lives, and kind of the way I would compare it is kind of internet. And I went through the .com time, and you know, initially it was like people were like, oh, browsers, internet. I mean, what's that going to be used for, right? Like, you know, Microsoft missed the boat, and nobody was like envisioning Airbnb and Uber, right? Like nobody could conceptualize that. And I think it's very similarly, blockchain, there's some innovation, but we don't know yet what is going to be built on top of it. So I think it's a good space to work in. I personally think so as I quit my day job and move to the blockchain.
All right, let me see here.